The Book of Enoch is considered one of the most contentious writings in history. It teaches ideas that conflict with core Christian beliefs, which is why it was excluded from the Bible. Yet it claims to reveal the secrets of the universe, mysteries about angels, the origins of evil, and the end of days. While most churches have dismissed it, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has maintained it as sacred scripture for over 2,000 years. To understand the Book of Enoch, we first need to look at the man behind the name. In the Hebrew Bible, Enoch is a mysterious figure who appears only briefly in Genesis. We don't get much about his life, no great stories, no long speeches. But then Genesis 5:24 tells us something unusual. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him. Unlike others in his genealogy who simply died, Enoch was taken. But where? How? The Bible doesn't say. Centuries later, a book bearing his name emerged, almost like a continuation of his story, filling in the gaps with visions, revelations, and hidden knowledge. It was widely known among early Christians and even referenced in the Book of Jude. But over time, it faded from mainstream Christianity, dismissed as too controversial and theologically problematic. But what exactly does this mysterious book say? Why was it removed from most Christian traditions, and what secrets does it hold? When we talk about the Book of Enoch, we're specifically referring to 1st Enoch, the most well-known of the writings attributed to him. But it's not the only one. There's also 2nd Enoch, sometimes called the Slavonic Enoch, and 3rd Enoch, a later mystical text from Jewish tradition. However, 1st Enoch is the most ancient and influential, and when people mention the Book of Enoch, this is usually the one they mean. This ancient text isn't just one continuous story. It's divided into 5 major sections, each exploring different themes, from visions of heaven and hell to the judgment of fallen angels. Some versions also include appendices, extra writings that add even more depth to its mysteries. These sections claim to reveal hidden knowledge, the kind that early Christians found fascinating, but also troubling. What exactly do they contain? And why did this book, once popular, end up outside most Christian traditions? The earliest parts of the Book of Enoch were likely written as far back as the 4th or 3rd century BCE, making it an ancient text. However, the oldest surviving complete copies of the book that we have today are much more recent, dating to the 15th or 16th centuries CE. The Book of Enoch has traveled through history, passing through multiple languages before reaching the form we know today. It was likely first written in Aramaic, the language spoken by many Jews during the Second Temple period. Later, it was translated into Greek, spreading its influence even further. But the most complete versions we have today were written in Ethiopic, also known as Ge'ez, a Semitic language closely related to Hebrew, Arabic, and Amharic. Ge'ez remains the liturgical language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Much like Latin was for Catholics, this explains why the best preserved manuscripts of the Book of Enoch come from Ethiopia, where the Church has safeguarded it for centuries. Though some parts of the text date back as early as the 4th or 3rd century BCE, the oldest surviving complete copies were written much later, around the 15th or 16th century CE. The Book of Enoch, as we know it today, is the result of centuries of preservation, discovery, and translation. Large portions of the Aramaic version were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, proving that the book was already well known among Jewish groups by the 1st century BCE. One particular fragment contained several sections compiled together, showing that even back then, Enoch's writings were being treated as a unified book rather than separate texts. In total, around 90 different manuscripts of 1st Enoch exist in some form, though many of them differ significantly from earlier versions. Some copies include additions or variations that evolved over time as the book was copied and translated across different regions. Fast forward to the 18th century, and the world would rediscover this so-called lost text. Scottish explorer James Bruce traveled to Ethiopia, where he obtained 3 copies of the Book of Enoch from the holy collection of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Now that we've explored the history and survival of the Book of Enoch, let's look into what it actually says and why it's so controversial. At its core, 1st Enoch is like spin-off literature. It takes 2 small, mysterious moments from Genesis and expands them into a grand, otherworldly narrative filled with visions, angels, and apocalyptic prophecies. The first inspiration comes from Genesis 5:24, where we're simply told that Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more because God took him. That's all the Hebrew Bible gives us. No explanation of where Enoch went or what happened to him. 1st Enoch fills in those gaps by turning him into a cosmic traveler who receives divine revelations. The second major inspiration comes from Genesis 6:1-4, which briefly mentions a cryptic event where divine beings, often called the sons of God, took human wives and produced the Nephilim, mysterious, powerful offspring. 1st Enoch builds an entire storyline around this, introducing the Watchers, a group of rebellious angels who descend to Earth, take human wives, and teach humanity forbidden knowledge, such as weapon-making and sorcery. Their actions corrupt the world, leading to divine judgment. The sons of God are not just a vague reference to heavenly beings. They are a specific group of 200 angels called the Watchers, whose primary role was to observe and oversee humanity without direct interaction. However, led by their chief Shemihazar, they defied their duty and descended to Earth, driven by desire for human women. This was not an impulsive act, but a planned rebellion. Shemihazar, fearing that some might abandon the plan, made the other Watchers swear an oath to go through with it together, ensuring that they all shared the consequences of their actions. The Watchers took wives and bore children, but their offspring, the Nephilim, were not ordinary beings. They were giants, powerful and destructive. According to 1st Enoch 7:3-6, these giants quickly became a scourge upon the earth. They consumed vast amounts of food, then turned to devouring animals, and eventually even humans. Their violence and insatiable hunger threw the world into chaos, setting the stage for divine intervention. Beyond physical destruction, the Watchers also introduced forbidden knowledge to humanity. In 1st Enoch 8, various Watchers are named as the ones who taught humans things they were never meant to know. Azazel introduced weapons of war, Shemihazar taught enchantments and sorcery, and others revealed astrology and hidden signs in the heavens. What might have seemed like advancements in knowledge only led to corruption, as people turned to violence, deception, and idolatry. The weight of this sin was unbearable. Humanity, overwhelmed by the destruction, cried out to God for help. In response, God sent 4 archangels, Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Uriel, to act as divine enforcers. Their mission was clear: bring judgment upon the Watchers and their monstrous offspring. Michael was tasked with imprisoning Shemihazar and the other rebellious angels, binding them in darkness until the final judgment. Gabriel was commanded to incite conflict among the Nephilim so they would destroy each other. Raphael was sent to deal with Azazel, casting him into a deep abyss. Finally, Uriel was instructed to warn Noah about the impending flood that would cleanse the earth of this corruption. Enoch himself played a crucial role in this unfolding drama. Unlike the Watchers, he remained righteous and was chosen as an emissary to deliver God's judgment to them. He warned the fallen angels of their doom, but it was too late. God had already decreed their punishment. Thus, the Book of Watchers paints a picture of divine beings who stepped beyond their bounds, unleashing chaos upon the earth. But their actions did not go unanswered. Divine justice was swift, and their legacy became a cautionary tale of disobedience and its consequences. After the Book of Watchers, the rest of 1st Enoch consists primarily of prophecies and visions. Instead of detailing each section, it is more useful to examine the major themes that emerge throughout these revelations: Messianism, final judgment, salvation and resurrection, and heavenly visions. These themes firmly place the Book of Enoch within the tradition of Jewish apocalyptic literature, which flourished during the Second Temple period. Apocalyptic literature, such as 1st Enoch, is characterized by mystical visions, in which an angel reveals the end times or a coming divine judgment. The Book of Enoch is one of the earliest examples of this genre, predating the Book of Daniel. Many terms later associated with Daniel, such as the Son of Man and the Messiah, first appear in Enoch. In one vision, Enoch sees the commissioning of the Son of Man, described as a figure who will guide the righteous, serve as a light to the nations, and receive worship from all the earth's inhabitants. This language closely mirrors later New Testament descriptions of Jesus. However, in chapter 71, Enoch himself is identified as the Son of Man, adding complexity to the messianic interpretation of the text. The Book of Enoch also presents one of the earliest fully developed ideas of hell. In contrast to the Hebrew Bible, which lacks a fully articulated doctrine of an afterlife or a place of eternal punishment, Enoch describes a chasm of fire where fallen angels and sinners are confined forever. Chapter 21:7 describes this place as a prison for the angels, emphasizing divine judgment and eternal damnation. This concept later influenced Christian and Jewish eschatology. The prophetic sections of 1st Enoch, particularly the Book of Dream Visions, contain numerous predictions about Israel's history. One of the most notable is its prophecy of the Genesis flood. In a passage resembling Genesis 6, Enoch is instructed to warn his great-grandson Noah about the coming deluge. "Go to Noah and tell him in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him that the end is approaching. The whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come upon the earth to destroy all that is on it." This passage reinforces the idea that Enoch foresaw the flood long before it occurred, aligning with biblical tradition. Other prophetic sections appear to describe historical events leading up to the Jewish revolt. Though interpretations vary, Enoch repeatedly emphasizes that the present world is corrupt and in need of divine intervention. The text foretells a final judgment where the wicked will be punished, while the righteous will be vindicated and resurrected. These themes became central to later Jewish and Christian theology, influencing ideas about the afterlife and divine justice. The Book of Enoch was once a big deal in both Jewish and early Christian circles. Several early church fathers, including Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Origen, and Clement of Alexandria, referenced or used it. The Epistle of Barnabas, a non-canonical Christian text from the 2nd century, even treated it as scripture. Tertullian, an influential early Christian writer, went as far as to call it holy. However, by the 4th century, attitudes toward the book shifted. Prominent figures like Augustine and Jerome rejected it, and it gradually faded from mainstream Christian use. By the 7th and 8th centuries, it was virtually unknown outside Ethiopia. But why was it banned elsewhere? The main reason was authorship. Despite its name, scholars widely agree that Enoch himself did not write the book. Instead, it was composed by multiple authors over several centuries. This made it an example of Pseudepigrapha, writings falsely attributed to a biblical figure. Ancient Jewish and Christian scholars took issue with this, as they considered divinely inspired scripture to be written by the person it claimed as its author. Another issue was its inconsistencies with biblical theology. One major contradiction was how the book portrayed the origins of evil. The Bible consistently teaches that Satan is the source of sin and rebellion against God. But in the book of Enoch, a fallen angel named Azazel is blamed for corrupting humanity, overshadowing Satan's role. Additionally, while the Bible states that fallen angels will be punished eternally, Enoch describes them repenting, something that doesn't align with biblical teachings. These differences raised concerns about the book's reliability. Despite being removed from most Christian canons, the Book of Enoch's influence is undeniable. It introduced and expanded on ideas such as hell, salvation, the Messiah, and the Son of Man, concepts that became central to Christian theology. The book also made an impact beyond Judaism and Christianity. In early Islam, the prophet Idris, who is often associated with Enoch, is mentioned in the Quran and described as being raised to a sublime station, mirroring Enoch's mysterious disappearance in Genesis 5:24. Some Islamic traditions even place Idris in the fourth heaven during the Prophet Muhammad's night journey. Whether one sees it as a historical text, a theological curiosity, or a work of ancient fiction, the Book of Enoch remains a fascinating piece of literature. It provides insights into how ancient people viewed angels, divine judgment, and the supernatural. Its influence can be traced through Jewish mysticism, early Christian theology, and even cross-cultural mythologies, where connections can be drawn between its stories and figures in Greek, Egyptian, and other mythologies. In the end, the Book of Enoch stands as a powerful, controversial, and thought-provoking work. While it may not be considered scripture by most today, it has certainly left its mark on religious history.